I am Vanessa King, 38 years old, and I am the silent architect behind a billion-dollar empire disguised as a housewife. To the world, I am just the lucky woman who married a tech genius. But in reality, I am the venture capitalist who secretly funded his entire career. My husband Patrick looked me in the eye and said he would leave our marriage with nothing because his mistress did not care about money. He had no idea I would make sure he kept that promise to the letter. The day I sold the house out from under him was the day his world fell apart. Before I tell you how I destroyed his ego and his bank account, hit that like button if you have ever been underestimated by someone you helped build up. The crystal chandeliers of the Plaza Hotel ballroom were blindingly bright, reflecting off the hundreds of diamond necklaces worn by Manhattan's elite. I stood near the edge of the stage, clutching a flute of vintage champagne that cost more than my father's first car. This was the night Kingstream went public. The ticker symbol was flashing on screens all around the room, showing a valuation that made everyone in this room very rich, especially my husband Patrick. He stood at the podium, basking in the applause. His tuxedo was tailored to perfection, a sharp contrast to the man I had met 10 years ago, wearing a stained hoodie in a garage. I watched him with a small, practiced smile plastered on my face. Inside my head, I was calculating the returns. Not just the financial returns, which were substantial, but the emotional investment. I had built him. When no bank would touch his smart home concept, I used my inheritance to set up a shell company called Aurora Ventures. I funneled $2 million into his startup. Patrick thought Aurora was some mysterious angel investor from Silicon Valley. He never knew it was the woman making him coffee every morning. I took a sip of the cold champagne, waiting for the moment he would acknowledge me. We had rehearsed this. He was supposed to thank his wife for her unwavering support. It was the standard CEO speech, but as Patrick raised his hand for silence, I saw his eyes drift past me. He was not looking at his wife. He was looking at the back of the room where the velvet ropes were. "Thank you, everyone," Patrick said, his voice amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system. "Tonight is a celebration of innovation, of looking forward. And I realized that to truly innovate, you have to shed the dead weight of the past." My stomach tightened. Dead weight. That was a new phrase. He had not used that in the rehearsal. Success is not a solitary journey. Patrick continued. You need inspiration. You need a muse. Someone who brings fresh energy. Someone who understands the future, not just the past. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Director of Wellness and the soul of my new life, Haley. The room went silent for a heartbeat before polite confusion turned into murmurs. From the shadows emerged Haley. She was 23 years old. She was my yoga instructor. I had hired her 6 months ago to help Patrick manage his stress. She was wearing a red silk dress that looked dangerously similar to one that had gone missing from my closet 2 weeks ago. She glided up the stairs to the stage, her blonde hair catching the stage lights. Patrick opened his arms and embraced her right there in front of the board of directors, in front of the press, in front of me. The flashbulbs erupted like a thunderstorm. I stood frozen. The champagne glass felt like ice in my hand. I watched my husband kiss another woman on the lips on the night of his greatest professional triumph. He pulled back and whispered something in her ear that made her giggle. It was a sound that cut through the noise of the crowd. A photographer from Forbes signaled to them. "Mr. King over here, please. Can we get a shot with the muse?" Patrick smiled for the camera, his arm tight around Haley's waist. Then he noticed me. I was still standing a few feet away, inadvertently in the frame. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He made a shooing motion with his hand. A subtle gesture, just a flick of the wrist telling me to move. "Excuse us, Vanessa," he mouthed over the noise. "This is for the key players." The humiliation washed over me, not like a hot wave, but like a bucket of ice water. Key players. He thought I was a spectator. He thought I was just the domestic accessory that came with the house. I stepped back out of the frame. I watched the camera capture the moment that would be on every business blog by morning. The CEO and his muse. I did not make a scene. I did not throw my drink. I simply turned around and walked toward the exit. As I passed a group of Patrick's college friends' men I had cooked dinner for 100 times, I heard them laughing. Finally, he traded up, one of them said. That old model was getting a bit rusty. I kept walking, my heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. Rusty, dead weight, old model. I stored every word in the mental folder I labeled evidence. They saw a defeated wife leaving in shame. They did not see the majority shareholder walking out to call her lawyers. The limousine ride home was suffocating. Patrick had insisted we share the car back, presumably to maintain appearances until we reached the privacy of our driveway. The partition was up, separating us from the driver. Patrick sat on the opposite bench, loosening his bow tie. He looked exhilarated. He looked like a man who thought he was untouchable. "You were quiet tonight," Patrick said, checking his reflection in the darkened window. "I hope you are not going to be dramatic about this, Vanessa." It had to happen eventually. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the arrogance that I had mistaken for confidence. "You introduced your mistress as your muse at your IPO launch," I said, my voice steady. "You humiliated me in front of our entire social circle. It is not humiliation, it is branding," Patrick said, waving his hand dismissively. "Haley represents the new king stream. Youth, vitality, minimalism. You represent the struggle years, the lean times. I have outgrown that, and frankly, I have outgrown you." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He tossed it onto the leather seat between us. It landed with a heavy thud. "Those are the divorce papers," Patrick said. "I had them drawn up last week. I was going to wait until after the quarterly review. But why wait? I want to start my new life now." I picked up the envelope. It was thick. "I know how you are with money," Vanessa, Patrick said, leaning forward, his eyes narrowing. "I know you like your comforts. You like this car. You like the Hamptons house. You like the country club membership." I said nothing. I just held the papers. "So here is the deal," Patrick said. "I am generous. I am going to let you keep the house. I will let you keep the joint savings account and the cars. All of it." I raised an eyebrow. That was millions of dollars in assets. "And in exchange," I asked, "in exchange you sign right now," Patrick said. "No alimony, no claim on my Kingstream shares, no claim on my future earnings. We make a clean break. I walk away with nothing but my clothes and my company. You keep the lifestyle." He sat back looking smug. He thought he was buying his freedom. He thought he was throwing a bone to a dog. "Haley does not care about money," he added, a smirk playing on his lips. "She is a minimalist. She loves my soul, not my bank account. She said she would live in a cardboard box with me as long as we are together. So I am giving you everything, Vanessa. I am walking away with nothing. Nothing," I repeated, slowly testing the word. "Nothing," he confirmed. "Just my shares, which are separate property anyway since I founded the company before we married." Technically, he was right about the timeline, but he was wrong about the funding. He had forgotten where the seed money came from. He had forgotten who owned the debt that converted into equity. I reached into my purse and pulled out a pen. I did not read the terms. I did not flip through the pages. I flipped to the last page, found the signature line, and signed my name, Vanessa King. Patrick blinked, surprised by my speed. He had expected a fight. He had expected tears or begging. "Done," I said, handing the papers back to him. "You walk away with nothing. I keep the house." He took the papers, checking the signature, as if he did not believe it. "Smart choice, Vanessa," he said, putting the envelope back in his pocket. "You are getting a great deal. That house is worth $10 million. You will be set for life." He had no idea. The house was not worth $10 million. The house was leveraged to buy the commercial real estate his servers were sitting on. And the house was not even in our names. It was held by a trust controlled by my shell company. But I did not tell him that. I let him have his victory lap. "I just want to be clear, Patrick," I said, as the limo pulled up to the wrought iron gates of our estate. "When you say nothing, you mean it." "Absolutely," he said, opening the door. "I do not need your charity. I am a billionaire now, or I will be when the market opens tomorrow." I stepped out of the car into the cool night air. The mansion loomed above us, a testament to the wealth I had carefully curated. "Good night, Patrick," I said. "Sleep well." I walked into the house alone. I went upstairs to the master bedroom and locked the door. I did not cry. I went to the walk-in closet and pulled out my hidden safe. Inside was not jewelry. Inside were the incorporation documents for Aurora Ventures. The promissory notes signed by Patrick King 7 years ago. The documents that proved I owned 51% of the voting rights in Kingstream through my holding companies. He wanted to leave with nothing. I would make sure he got exactly what he wished for. The next morning, I was in the kitchen drinking black coffee when I heard the front door open. It was not Patrick returning from a morning run. It was the sound of rolling suitcases, heavy ones. I walked into the foyer and stopped. Patrick was there dragging 2 massive Louis Vuitton trunks, and behind him, wearing oversized sunglasses and clutching a green juice, was Haley. She lowered her sunglasses and looked around the foyer as if she were inspecting a hotel lobby. "It is a bit dark in here, isn't it?" she said. Her voice was gratingly sweet. "We need to open up the energy flow." "Excuse me," I said, stepping forward. "What is happening here?" Patrick looked up a bit sheepish but mostly defiant. "Haley is moving in," he said, "just for a few days. Until we close on the new penthouse in the city. The hotel was too stuffy." "You cannot be serious," I said. "We just signed divorce papers last night. This is my house. You said I could keep it." "Technically, the papers have not been filed yet," Patrick said, shrugging. "So legally, this is still my house too, and Haley is my guest. Be nice, Vanessa. She is trying to help us transition." Haley walked past me trailing the scent of expensive patchouli oil. She walked right into the living room and stood in front of the mantel. On it sat a Ming vase that my grandmother had brought over from Hong Kong. It was the only thing I had left of her. "This," she said, pointing a manicured finger at the vase, "this blocks the qi. It is too heavy, too old." Before I could move, she reached out and pushed it. She did not accidentally bump it. She pushed it. The vase tipped over the edge and shattered on the hardwood floor. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent house. "Oops," Haley said, covering her mouth with a hand that did not look sorry at all. "Clumsy me, but honestly, Vanessa, it is a blessing. Now you have space for something new." I looked at the shards of blue and white porcelain, my grandmother's legacy reduced to garbage by a 23-year-old yoga teacher. Patrick walked in and saw the mess. He looked at the vase, then at me. "It was an accident, Vanessa," he said, putting a protective arm around Haley. "Do not make a big deal out of it. It was just an old pot. I will buy you a new one." "It was not just a pot," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. Haley rolled her eyes. "God, the energy here is so toxic, Patrick. How did you live with this negativity for 10 years? We need to cleanse this space." She stepped over the shards of my grandmother's vase and started walking toward the kitchen. "I am going to make a matcha latte," she announced. "Do we have almond milk or just that dairy poison?" Patrick followed her like a puppy, leaving me standing alone in the ruins of my living room. That was the moment. The sadness evaporated. The shock vanished. All that was left was a cold, hard resolve. He brought her into my sanctuary. He let her break my history. He told me to accept it. I turned around and walked quietly into my office. I closed the door and locked it. I picked up my burner phone, the one Patrick did not know existed. I dialed a number I had saved for emergencies. Jordan picked up on the first ring. Jordan was my sister-in-law, Patrick's brother's wife. She was a brilliant intellectual property lawyer and the only person in the family who knew the truth about who really held the purse strings. She hated Patrick's arrogance almost as much as I did. "Hey, V," she said, "I saw the news about the IPO and the photos. Are you okay?" "I am done being okay, Jordan," I said, looking at the wall of monitors on my desk. He moved her in. She broke Nana's vase, and he told me he wants to leave with nothing. There was a pause on the line. Then I heard the sound of a laptop opening. "What do you want to do?" Jordan asked, her voice shifting from sympathetic friend to shark lawyer. "Execute Protocol 13, I said. "Protocol 13, Jordan repeated. "The asset liquidation. Are you sure, Vanessa? That is the nuclear option. If we pull that trigger, there is no going back. He will be on the street, literally." I looked at the closed door of my office. I could hear Haley giggling in my kitchen. I could hear Patrick laughing, that deep, satisfied laugh of a man who thinks he has won the lottery. He wanted nothing, I said, my hand hovering over the enter key on my own computer. Let's give him nothing. Sell the house, freeze the accounts, and call the board. I want an emergency meeting. Consider it done, Jordan said. By the way, who is the buyer for the house? We need a name for the deed transfer to make it fast. I smiled for the first time in 24 hours. Sell it to the shell company, I said, but tell the police to evict the squatters immediately. I hung up the phone. Outside, the sun was shining on the manicured lawn. Inside, the storm was just beginning. Patrick thought he was the king of the castle. He did not realize he was just a trespasser in my empire. And eviction day was tomorrow. By noon, the invasion had moved from the foyer to the sanctuary of the second floor. I was standing in the hallway holding a basket of laundry when I heard them. They were in the master bedroom, my bedroom, the room where I had nursed Patrick through the flu, where I had comforted him when his first startup failed, and where I had spent countless nights staring at the ceiling, wondering when exactly we had become strangers. Now I heard Haley's voice drifting out into the corridor. It was high-pitched and authoritative, the voice of someone who had never been told no. The energy in here is stagnant, she was saying. Can you feel it, Patrick? It is heavy. It pulls down on your chakras. No wonder you have been feeling blocked creatively. The orientation of the bed is all wrong for a fire sign like you. I walked to the open door and leaned against the frame. The scene before me was almost comical, if it were not so infuriating. Haley was walking around the room holding a bundle of burning sage wafting smoke into the corners of my walk-in closet. She was wearing one of Patrick's oversized dress shirts and nothing else. My husband was sitting on the edge of the bed, our bed, watching her with a look of mesmerized devotion. "Excuse me," I said, my voice cutting through the haze of sage smoke. "Is there a reason you are performing an exorcism in my bedroom?" Patrick jumped slightly, looking guilty. Haley just turned around, smiling that beatific, condescending smile. "Oh, hi, Vanessa," she said. "We are not exorcising demons, just stale energy." Patrick and I were discussing the sleeping arrangements. Since I'm going to be staying here to support him during the transition, we need to make sure his environment is optimized for success. "Optimized," I repeated. "Yes," Patrick chimed in, standing up and smoothing his shirt. He refused to meet my eyes. "Look, Vanessa, the guest room down the hall is perfectly comfortable. It has its own bathroom. It is very private." I stared at him. "You want me to move into the guest room? In my own house?" "It is just temporary," Patrick said quickly. "Haley feels that, well, she feels that the master suite has the best feng shui for my productivity. And right now, with the IPO and everything, I need to be at my peak. You understand, right? You have always been supportive of my work." The audacity was breathtaking. He was evicting me from my own bed because his 23-year-old mistress thought the feng shui was better for his stock price. He was using my own history of support against me, weaponizing my loyalty. Haley walked over to the bay window and ran her hand along the velvet curtains I had custom ordered from Italy. "It is the light," she said. "The morning light hits this room perfectly. It is essential for Patrick's circadian rhythm. Plus, the guest room faces north. North is the direction of hibernation. That is much better for you, Vanessa, since you are, well, you are in a resting phase of your life." Resting phase. She meant retiring. She meant finished. She was telling me I was obsolete to my face while standing in the room I had designed. I looked at the California king bed. I looked at the nightstands where my books still sat. I looked at the photos of us on the dresser taken in simpler times. "Fine," I said. Patrick blinked. He had been bracing for a fight. He had his arguments ready. He looked almost disappointed that he did not get to use them. "Fine," he asked, just like that. "Yes," I said, stepping into the room. "If the feng shui is so critical for the company, who am I to argue?" "The guest room is fine." Haley clapped her hands together, a little victory dance. "Oh, that is so big of you, Vanessa. Truly, I was worried you would be attached to the material aspect of the room. It is so liberating to let go, isn't it?" I ignored her. I walked past them toward the walk-in closet. "I just need to get a few things," I said. "My clothes, my toiletries." "Take your time," Patrick said magnanimously, now that he had won. "We are going to grab some lunch by the pool." They left the room, Haley hanging on his arm, whispering about how she was going to replace the heavy drapes with organic linen. As soon as their footsteps faded down the stairs, I moved. I did not go for my clothes. I did not go for my jewelry box, which sat openly on the vanity. I went straight to the back of the closet behind the rows of designer winter coats that I rarely wore. I pushed aside the heavy wool trenches and knelt down. There, built into the wall behind a false electrical panel, was a safe. It was not the main safe in the study where Patrick kept his watch collection and our marriage certificate. This was my safe. The one I had installed 5 years ago when I first started noticing the way Patrick looked at younger women. I punched in the code. It was the date my father had started his first business, a date Patrick would never know. The lock clicked and the small, heavy door swung open. My heart was hammering against my ribs, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I reached inside. First, I pulled out the black velvet pouch containing my grandmother's diamonds, then the thick stack of bearer bonds. But those were just appetizers. The main course was in the blue leather folder at the bottom. I opened it to check. There they were. The original stock certificates for the holding company that owned the majority share of Kingstream. The documents that proved Aurora Ventures was not a faceless conglomerate, but a sole proprietorship owned by Vanessa King, and underneath them, the deed to this house. Patrick thought he was kicking me out of his house. He did not know he was sleeping in a house that belonged to a company he had just declared war on. I shoved the folder into my tote bag, covering it with a few sweaters and a pair of pajamas. I stood up and closed the safe, replacing the false panel. I smoothed the coats back into place. I took a deep breath. I looked around the closet one last time. There were rows of shoes Patrick had bought me as apology gifts over the years. Dozens of handbags. I left them all. I did not need things. I needed ammunition. I walked back out into the bedroom. The smell of sage was still thick in the air, masking the familiar scent of lavender and cedar that I loved. It already felt like a stranger's room. I grabbed my pillow from the bed. As I did, I noticed a small stain on the silk pillowcase. It was wine. From last week when Patrick and I had tried to have a romantic evening that ended in silence. I stripped the pillowcase off and threw it in the hamper. I walked to the door, my tote bag heavy on my shoulder. Patrick and Haley were coming back up the stairs laughing about something. They stopped when they saw me. "All packed?" Haley asked, looking at my single bag. "You travel light. I admire that. I just took the essentials," I said. Patrick looked at me, a flicker of something like guilt crossing his face before he suppressed it. "Thanks for being reasonable about this, Vanessa. It really means a lot. The energy in here, it is just better for us." I looked at him, then I looked at the bed where I had spent 10 years trying to be the perfect wife. "Enjoy the room." I said, my voice completely flat, devoid of any anger or sadness. "Honestly, you are doing me a favor." "What do you mean?" Patrick asked, narrowing his eyes. "I mean the mattress," I said. "It is 10 years old, Patrick. It has lost all its support. It remembers all the bad nights, all the fights, all the times you turned your back on me to sleep. It is sagging in the middle." I adjusted the bag on my shoulder, feeling the weight of the deed against my side. "I have been meaning to get rid of it for years," I continued, "but I never had the heart to throw it out. Now I do not have to. It fits you too perfectly." Haley's smile faltered. She looked at the bed as if it might be contaminated. Patrick's jaw tightened. "That is petty, Vanessa." Maybe I said. Or maybe it is just honest. "Sleep tight." I walked past them down the hall to the guest room. I did not slam the door. I closed it softly. Then I sat on the small twin bed in the guest room and pulled out my phone. I opened the banking app. I saw the pending transactions on the joint account. Patrick had just spent $5,000 at a luxury bedding store. He was trying to buy new sheets to cover up the old lies. I tapped the screen, transferring the remaining balance of the joint savings money that was legally half mine, but realistically entirely mine, into my private offshore account. Then I sent a text to the real estate agent who managed the shell company's properties. Listing status active. Price 20% below market value for cash offer. Immediate closing. I heard music starting to thump from the master bedroom. They were celebrating their conquest. They thought they had taken my territory. They did not realize I had just scorched the earth beneath their feet. I lay back on the guest bed. It was small, but the mattress was firm. It felt like a fresh start. Tomorrow the sign would go up. Tomorrow the locks would change. But for tonight, I would let them sleep in the bed they had made. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years I slept soundly, knowing that the woman in the master bedroom was cuddling a man who was technically already homeless. I decided to leave the house for a while. The walls of the guest room were starting to feel like they were closing in on me, and the sound of Haley's laughter echoing from the pool area was becoming physically painful to endure. I needed air. I needed normalcy. So I did what any suburban woman does when she needs to regain a sense of control. I went to the grocery store. I drove my Range Rover to the Whole Foods in the village center. It was a mundane errand, but right now, the mundane felt like a luxury. I pushed my cart through the aisles, filling it with the things I liked. Not the kale and quinoa Patrick insisted on eating to maintain his CEO physique. Not the oat milk Haley demanded for her lattes. I bought the expensive French cheese Patrick said smelled too strong. I bought the dark chocolate truffles he called a waste of money. I bought a bottle of heavy, full-bodied Cabernet. For the first time in years, I was shopping just for me. It felt strange, almost illicit. I was a wife who had been demoted to a guest in her own home, yet here I was buying comfort food as if everything were fine. I reached the checkout counter. The line was long. Behind me stood a woman I recognized from the country club. We had played tennis once or twice. She was wearing perfectly pressed Lululemon gear and talking loudly on her phone about her kitchen renovation. I kept my head down, pulling my sunglasses from my head to cover my eyes, hoping she wouldn't spot me. I didn't want to explain why I was buying dinner for one on a Tuesday night. The cashier was a young girl with bright pink hair and a bored expression. She scanned my items efficiently, the beep of the machine creating a rhythmic backdrop to my anxious thoughts. "That will be $240.50, the girl said, popping her gum. I reached into my wallet. I bypassed my personal debit card. I bypassed the secret black card tucked in the hidden flap. Instead, I pulled out the Platinum Joint credit card, the one Patrick and I had shared for a decade, the one that was supposed to be for household expenses. Technically, I was buying food for the household, even if I was the only one eating it. I tapped the card on the reader. Processing appeared on the screen. I waited, staring at the little spinning circle. Then a harsh buzz sounded. The screen flashed red. Declined. I frowned. That was impossible. The limit on that card was $50,000. We paid it off in full every month. "I am sorry," the cashier said, bored. "It didn't go through." "Do you want to try again?" "It must be a chip error," I said, forcing a smile. "Try swiping it." She took the card and swiped it on the side of the machine. Again the harsh buzz. Again the red letters. Declined. Code 05, the cashier read from her screen. That usually means reported lost or stolen, or just canceled. The woman behind me shifted impatiently, sighing loudly. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. This was the specific brand of suburban humiliation that everyone feared. The moment you are exposed as a fraud in the checkout line. My phone buzzed in my purse. A single text message. I pulled it out. It was from Patrick. Saw the transaction attempt at Whole Foods. Declined it. "Sorry, V, but you need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. I need to preserve capital for Haley's smart home renovation. She has big ideas for the kitchen. You can use your own allowance if you have any left. Welcome to the real world." I stared at the screen. The cruelty was so casual. He hadn't just canceled the card. He had set up an alert to decline it personally. He was watching. He wanted me to be embarrassed. He wanted me to feel small. He wanted me to panic and beg him to turn it back on. He was saving money for Haley's kitchen renovation. My kitchen. The kitchen I had designed with the architect 3 years ago. "Ma'am," the cashier said, her voice losing its boredom and gaining an edge of annoyance. "Do you have another form of payment? There are people waiting." The woman behind me cleared her throat. "If you can't pay, I can go ahead," she said, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. I looked at Patrick's text one more time. Welcome to the real world. He thought the real world was one where he held all the cards. He thought he was the provider cutting off a dependent. He had forgotten that the only reason he had a credit limit at all was because my assets were the collateral backing his entire financial existence. I took a deep breath. I put the platinum card back in my wallet. Actually, I said, my voice steady and cool, I do have another card. I reached into the hidden flap of my wallet. I pulled out a card made of anodized titanium. It was heavy, cold, and black. The American Express Centurion, the black card. It wasn't a card you applied for. It was a card you were invited to carry only if your spending and assets reached a level Patrick could only dream of. He had always wanted one. He had applied twice and been rejected twice. He didn't know I had carried one for 5 years. I held it out. The cashier's eyes widened. She stopped popping her gum. She knew what this was. Everyone in retail knew what this was. The woman behind me went silent. I tapped the heavy metal card against the reader. It didn't buzz. It chimed. Approved. Receipt. Ma'am? The cashier asked, her attitude completely transformed. She was suddenly respectful, almost reverent. No, thank you, I said. I didn't look at the woman behind me as I grabbed my bags. I walked out of the store, my head held high. But inside I was not calm. I was furious. He cut me off for groceries. He humiliated me for $200. I walked to my car and loaded the bags into the trunk. I sat in the driver's seat, but I didn't start the engine. I picked up my phone again. I opened my secure messaging app. I found the contact for my private banker at J.P. Morgan, a man named Arthur who managed my personal wealth, not the joint accounts Patrick knew about. Arthur, I typed, I need a favor. Anything, Mrs. King. The reply came instantly. The joint operating account with Patrick King ending in 4590, I wrote. The one linked to the household expenses and the mortgage payments. Yes, I see it. It has a balance of $850,000. Freeze it, I typed. There was a pause. 3 dots danced on the screen. Freeze it? Arthur asked. Like for fraud? No, I replied. Freeze it for audit. Tell the system there is suspicious activity involving unauthorized third-party spending, specifically spending related to a Haley. I can do that, Arthur replied. But King will be locked out of everything. Mortgage utilities, his daily spending card. It will take at least 48 hours to clear the security flag. Do it, I typed. Executed at 9:00 a.m. tomorrow, right when he tries to buy his morning coffee. Understood, Arthur replied. Consider it done. I put the phone down. My hands were shaking slightly, but not from fear, from the rush of power. Patrick wanted to play financial games. He wanted to teach me a lesson about the real world. He cut off my grocery money. I just cut off his oxygen. I started the car and drove back toward the mansion. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the manicured lawns of our neighborhood. I thought about the text message again. Haley has big ideas for the kitchen. Well, Haley better have big ideas for how to cook over a campfire, because by tomorrow afternoon, the electricity bill for that big house wasn't going to get paid. And neither was the credit card she was using to buy her organic matcha. I pulled into the driveway. I saw Patrick's Tesla parked prominently in the front, blocking the garage entrance. Another small power move. Another way to say, I am the master here. I parked on the side. I grabbed my bag of expensive cheese and wine. I walked into the house. Patrick was in the living room showing Haley something on his iPad. They looked up as I entered. Got your snacks? Patrick asked, smirking. Did the old debit card work, or did you have to dig for loose change? I didn't stop walking. I didn't look at him. I managed, I said breezily. Oh, and Patrick, thanks for the advice about standing on my own 2 feet. You are right. Financial independence is so important. He looked confused by my lack of anger. He expected a fight. He expected tears. Yeah, well, good, he muttered. Just don't expect me to bail you out when you run dry. I smiled, a genuine cold smile. I won't, I said. I walked past them and up the stairs to the guest room. I uncorked the wine and poured myself a glass. I sat by the window looking out at the pool where Haley had set up her yoga mats. 9:00 a.m. tomorrow. I took a sip of the wine. It was rich and complex. It tasted like victory. Patrick thought he had cut the line. He didn't realize he was the one hanging by a thread, and I had just handed the scissors to the bank. The bass started thumping around 7 in the evening. It wasn't the sophisticated jazz or classical music that usually filled our home. It was a heavy, repetitive electronic beat that shook the floorboards of the guest room. I lay on the narrow twin bed staring at the ceiling and feeling the vibrations travel up through the frame. Patrick never hosted parties on Tuesdays. He used to say that Tuesday was the most critical day for productivity because it set the tone for the rest of the week. But apparently the new Patrick, the one who listened to Haley and drank green juice and believed in energy flow, had decided that Tuesday was the perfect night for a housewarming party. A housewarming party in a house he was technically divorcing. A housewarming party in a house I was still living in. I tried to ignore it. I put on my noise-canceling headphones and tried to review the quarterly reports for Aurora Ventures. But then the laughter started. It wasn't just Patrick and Haley. There were dozens of people down there. I could hear the clinking of glass, the shrieks of performative delight, and the heavy tread of shoes on the hardwood floors. My throat felt dry. I needed water. The guest room did not have a mini fridge, and I refused to cower in a room like a prisoner while strangers drank my wine downstairs. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my silk robe, and opened the door. The noise hit me instantly. It was louder than I expected. The hallway smelled of expensive cologne and something sweeter like vape smoke. I walked down the grand staircase. The scene below was a desecration. My living room, the room I had designed with quiet elegance in mind, had been turned into a nightclub. The furniture was pushed against the walls. There were red gels over the recessed lighting, casting the room in a hellish crimson glow. A DJ was set up in the corner near the fireplace, using my antique mahogany desk as a stand for his turntables. There were at least 30 people. I recognized some of them. There were the junior executives from Kingstream Men who had smiled at me at Christmas parties for years. There were a few of Haley's friends, influencers, who were busy filming themselves holding my crystal glasses. And in the center of it all was Patrick. He was holding court near the piano, laughing loudly at something a young woman in a sequined dress was saying. His arm was draped possessively around Haley, who was wearing a white dress that looked more appropriate for a wedding than a Tuesday night gathering. I reached the bottom of the stairs. For a moment, nobody noticed me. I was a ghost in my own home. Then, one of the junior executives, a man named Marcus, who I had personally approved for a promotion last year, looked up and saw me. His eyes widened. He nudged the guy next to him. The chatter died down in ripples spreading outward from the staircase until the room fell into an awkward hush. Even the DJ seemed to sense the tension and lowered the volume. Patrick turned around. When he saw me, his smile didn't fade. It just changed. It hardened into something sharp and cruel. "Well, look who decided to join the living," he called out, his voice booming in the sudden quiet. "Everyone say hello to Vanessa. She is living in the guest quarters now." A few people giggled nervously. Haley stepped forward, swirling the wine in her glass. It was my vintage Bordeaux, the bottle I had been saving for our 10th anniversary. "Hi, Vanessa," she said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. "We didn't think you would come down. We thought you would be asleep by now, considering your schedule." "My schedule?" I asked calmly. Haley said, shrugging. "Early to bed. The quiet life. We are just celebrating the new energy of the house." Patrick felt like the old vibe was so stagnant. "We wanted to bring in some youth, some life." She emphasized the word youth, looking me up and down. I was wearing a silk dressing gown that cost more than her car, but in this light, surrounded by 20-year-olds in fast fashion, I knew how I looked to them. I looked like the past. "I'm just getting some water," I said, stepping off the last step. "I don't want to interrupt your celebration." I started to walk toward the kitchen. To get there, I had to pass through the center of the room. The crowd parted for me, but not out of respect. It was like they were avoiding a contagion. As I passed, I heard the whispers. "That is the ex-wife. She looks tired." Patrick said she was practically a roommate for the last 2 years, sad really hanging around when she is clearly not wanted. I kept my chin up, my eyes focused on the kitchen door. But Patrick wasn't done. He stepped into my path, blocking my way. He was slightly flushed from the alcohol. "Come on, V, have a drink," he said, holding out a glass. "Don't be such a downer. Just because we are splitting up doesn't mean you can't be happy for me. Look around. This is success. This is what winning looks like." I looked at him. I looked at the sycophants drinking his liquor, thinking he was a genius. They didn't know he was broke. They didn't know his credit cards were frozen and that this party was probably being paid for on a line of credit that would default in 48 hours. "I am happy that you are showing your true colors, Patrick," I said quietly. "Now please move." Haley laughed. She walked over to the grand piano. My Steinway, the piano my father had taught me to play on. On the piano lid sat a collection of framed photographs. Most of them were just artistic shots of landscapes, but there was one in the center, a heavy silver frame containing the last photo of my parents taken just weeks before the accident that killed them. In the photo, they were smiling, standing in front of this very house, which they had built 30 years ago. Haley hopped up, sitting on the edge of the piano, swinging her legs. "This room definitely needs a makeover," she announced to the room. "It is so cluttered, all these old dusty things." She picked up the silver frame. She held it up, inspecting it with a grimace. "Like this," she said. "Who are these people anyway? They look so grim. It is such bad energy to have dead people staring at you while you are trying to party." "Put that down," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was cold enough to freeze the air in the room. Patrick looked at me, then at Haley. He laughed nervously. "Come on, Haley, put it back. Those are her parents." "But it ruins the aesthetic," Haley whined. She dangled the heavy frame by one corner between her thumb and forefinger. "It is just so heavy. Everything in this house is so heavy, Patrick. Don't you want to feel light? Don't you want to be free of all this baggage?" "Give it to me," I said, taking a step forward. Haley looked me right in the eye, a challenge. She smiled a wicked little smile. "Oops," she said. She opened her fingers. The frame fell. It hit the hardwood floor with a sickening crunch. The glass shattered instantly. The heavy silver frame bent on impact. The photo inside my parents' smiling faces lay face down amidst the jagged shards. The room went completely silent. Even the music seemed to stop. I stared at the broken glass. I felt a physical pain in my chest, a sharp stab as if she had struck me. That photo was the original. I didn't have a digital copy. Haley covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with fake shock. "Oh my God," she said, her voice lacking any genuine remorse. "It just slipped. I am so clumsy. But really, Vanessa, maybe it is a sign. Out with the old right." I looked up at Patrick. I waited for him to yell at her. I waited for him to defend me. I waited for him to show 1 ounce of decency. He looked at the broken glass. Then he looked at Haley, who was pouting prettily. He sighed. "It was an accident, Vanessa," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Don't make a scene. It is just a picture. We can print a new one. Just a picture." I looked at the man I had married, the man I had saved from bankruptcy, the man I had built into a titan. And in that moment, the last tiny thread of hesitation snapped. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't lunge at Haley. I looked down at the photo one last time. I memorized the pattern of the shattered glass. "You are right," I said softly. "It is a sign." I stepped over the glass. I didn't bend down to pick it up. I didn't try to salvage the photo. I left it there on the floor, lying in the wreckage they had created. I walked past Patrick. I walked past the stunned guests. I walked straight to the front door. "Where are you going?" Patrick called after me. "You can't just leave. You are being dramatic." I opened the heavy oak door. The night air was cool and crisp. A black SUV was already waiting at the curb. I had called it from the top of the stairs the moment I saw the red lights. I turned back to look at them one last time. Patrick standing amidst the fake friends and the spilled wine. Haley perched on my piano like a vulture. "I am going to a hotel," I said. "The noise is too much for me." I walked out. I didn't take a coat. I didn't take a bag. I just had my phone and the titanium card in my pocket. I climbed into the back of the Uber. "Where to?" ma'am, the driver asked. "The Four Seasons," I said, "and please drive fast." As the car pulled away, I watched the house recede in the rearview mirror. It was glowing with red light pulsing with the beat of the music. It looked like a dying star. I pulled out my phone. I opened the messaging app. I typed 3 sentences to Patrick. I wanted him to see them while he was still laughing. I wanted them to be the last thing he read before the sun came up and his world ended. "I left the mess on the floor for you. It seems fitting since you love living in wreckage. Enjoy your last night, Patrick." I hit send. Then I blocked his number. I leaned back in the leather seat. I didn't look back again. The house was already gone. The past was already dead. Tomorrow the executioner would arrive, and her name was Vanessa King. The morning sun hit the Hamptons with a brightness that felt aggressive. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. Inside the master bedroom of my former home, the blackout curtains I had installed specifically to block out that intensity were drawn tight, but they could not block out the sound that was about to shatter Patrick's reality. I was not there physically. I was sitting in a plush armchair in my suite at the Four Seasons, drinking a freshly brewed cappuccino and watching the live feed from the security cameras on my iPad. I had paid for that security system. I had set up the passwords. And in his arrogance, Patrick had never bothered to change them. He thought he was the master of the house, but he was just a guest who had overstayed his welcome. On the screen, I saw the black SUV pull up to the curb. It was not a limousine. It was a government vehicle. Behind it was a moving truck. And standing on the front porch was the sheriff of Suffolk County, a man named Miller, who I had met at several charity fundraisers. Beside him stood a woman in a sharp gray suit. She was the representative for the new owner of the property. I watched Sheriff Miller raise his fist and pound on the heavy oak door. The sound was picked up by the doorbell camera. It was a heavy, authoritative thud that demanded attention. Inside the house, the silence was broken. I switched the camera view to the living room. The remnants of the party were still scattered everywhere. Red plastic cups, spilled wine on the Persian rug, the shattered remains of my parents' photo frame still lying where Haley had dropped it. The pounding continued. I saw Patrick stumble out of the master bedroom upstairs. He was wearing his silk robe, the one I had bought him in Milan. He looked disoriented, his hair a mess, his face puffy from the expensive scotch he had consumed the night before. He walked to the landing railing and looked down at the door. "Who the hell is that?" he shouted, his voice cracking with sleep and irritation. "Do you know what time it is?" The pounding did not stop. Not. It only got louder. Patrick marched down the stairs muttering curses. He did not look like a tech billionaire. He looked like a hungover man about to have a very bad day. He unlocked the door and swung it open, ready to unleash his fury on whoever dared to disturb his sleep. "Can I help you?" Patrick snapped, blinking in the harsh sunlight. Sheriff Miller did not smile. He did not apologize. He stepped across the threshold, pushing Patrick back slightly with his sheer physical presence. "Patrick King," the sheriff asked. "Yes, I am Patrick King," Patrick said, straightening his robe, trying to summon some of his CEO dignity. "And you are trespassing on private property." "Sheriff, I suggest you leave before I call my lawyers." The sheriff looked at the woman in the gray suit. She stepped forward, holding a clipboard with a thick stack of documents. "Mr. King," she said, her voice crisp and professional. "My name is Elaine Richards. I represent the owner of this property. You are currently trespassing." Patrick laughed. It was a dry, incredulous laugh. "The owner," he repeated. "Lady, I am the owner. I built this house. My name is on the mailbox. Now get off my porch." Elaine did not flinch. She handed him a document from the top of the stack. "That is incorrect, Mr. King," she said. "According to the deed recorded with the county clerk 72 hours ago, this property was sold. The title was transferred fully and completely to the new holding company. You signed the quitclaim deed yourself." Patrick looked at the paper. I watched his face on the high-definition camera. I saw the blood drain from his cheeks. I saw his eyes widen as he recognized his own signature, the signature he had scribbled in the back of the limousine just 2 nights ago. He thought he was signing divorce papers. He thought he was signing away his rights to alimony. He did not read the exhibits. Exhibit A was the house. Exhibit B was the contents of the house. He had signed it all away in his haste to secure his freedom. "This is a mistake," Patrick stammered, his hands shaking. "I signed divorce papers. I didn't sell the house. Vanessa said I could keep it. She said—" "The paper says otherwise," Mr. King. Elaine interrupted. "It is a legally binding transfer. The closing was immediate. You are currently occupying this residence illegally. The new owner has requested immediate possession." Patrick looked around wildly. Wait. I need to call my wife. I need to call Vanessa. She will clear this up." She is not your wife anymore, Patrick, the sheriff said, his hand resting on his belt. And she is not the owner. The owner is a corporate entity, and they want you out. Now. From the top of the stairs, a shrill voice cut through the tension. Patrick, what is going on? Why is the door open? It was Haley. She was standing on the landing, wrapped in one of the Egyptian cotton sheets from the guest bed. She looked sleepy and annoyed. Babe, tell them to go away, she whined. My head is pounding, ma'am, the sheriff called out, looking up at her. You need to come down here, now. Haley froze. She looked at Patrick, expecting him to fix it. But Patrick was staring at the paper in his hand, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Patrick, she said, her voice rising in panic. Who are these people? They say the house is sold, Patrick whispered. Sold, Haley screeched. What do you mean, sold? We live here. Not anymore, ma'am, the sheriff said. You have 5 minutes to vacate the premises. 5 minutes, Patrick shouted, finding his voice again. That is insane. We have furniture here. We have clothes. We have valuables. I have a server room in the basement worth $500,000. Elaine shook her head. I am afraid not, Mr. King. She flipped to the second page of the document. The contract clearly states that the property is sold, as is including all fixtures, furnishings, and contents located within the dwelling at the time of closing. Patrick stared at her. Contents. That means the furniture Elaine listed, the electronics, the artwork, the clothing in the closets. It all belongs to the new owner. No, Patrick roared. That is theft. You cannot take my things. You gave them away, Mr. King, Elaine said calmly. You signed the clause that said you would vacate with nothing. The contract was very specific about the definition of nothing. I watched from my hotel room and I took a sip of my coffee. It was the most delicious coffee I had ever tasted. I remembered writing that clause. I remembered telling my lawyer to make the definition of personal property as restrictive as legally possible. Patrick had wanted to leave with nothing. I was simply honoring his request. The sheriff checked his watch. You have 4 minutes remaining. I suggest you step outside. But we are naked, Haley screamed, clutching the sheet tighter. I am not going out there like this. You are wearing a sheet, ma'am, the sheriff said. That is sufficient for an eviction. If you do not leave voluntarily, my deputies will assist you. 2 uniformed deputies appeared behind the sheriff. They looked like they meant business. Patrick looked at the deputies, then at the sheriff, then at the document. The reality was finally sinking in. This was not a negotiation. This was a removal. Okay, Patrick said, holding up his hands. Let us just go upstairs and get dressed. Just let us put on some jeans. Please. The sheriff shook his head. I cannot let you out of my sight, and I cannot let you remove any property from the premises. That includes the clothing in the closets, which now belongs to the owner. You have got to be kidding me, Patrick yelled. You are going to throw us out in our pajamas. Those are the terms the sheriff said. 3 minutes. Haley began to cry. It was a loud, ugly sound. Patrick, this cannot be happening. Do something. You are the CEO. Tell them who you are. I am Patrick King. Patrick yelled at the sheriff. I am the founder of Kingstream. I am worth billions. You will lose your badge for this. The sheriff stepped closer. His face was inches from Patrick's. Mr. King, right now, you are a squatter in a house you do not own. I do not care if you are the King of England. You are leaving. He grabbed Patrick by the arm, not roughly but firmly, a grip that said, resistance is futile. Let's go, the sheriff said. Patrick tried to pull away, but the deputy was already there, grabbing his other arm. Get your hands off me, Patrick screamed. This is assault. Haley, seeing Patrick being restrained, let out a shriek and tried to run back toward the bedroom. Grab her, the sheriff ordered. The female deputy moved fast. She caught Haley halfway up the stairs. No, my yoga mats, Haley screamed as she was escorted down the stairs. My crystals. My phone. I need my phone. Your phone is on the table by the door, the deputy said, picking it up. You can take that. Anything else stays. They were marched to the door, Patrick in his silk robe and slippers, Haley in a bedsheet clutching her iPhone. They stepped out onto the porch. The morning air was crisp and cold. The sprinklers had just turned on, spraying a fine mist over the lawn. The sheriff closed the heavy oak door behind them. I heard the lock click. That was it. My house was sealed. My sanctuary was reclaimed. Patrick stood on the porch, shivering. He looked at the closed door, then at the moving truck that was backing into the driveway. "What is the truck for?" he asked, his voice trembling. "The new owner has ordered the house to be cleared," Elaine said. "Everything is being donated to charity." "Charity," Patrick whispered. "My Italian suits, my watch collection." "All of it," Elaine said. Haley was sobbing openly now, huddled against a pillar for warmth. "Look!" she cried, pointing to the street. Patrick looked. A small crowd had gathered. Neighbors, the people we had hosted for barbecues, the people Patrick had bragged to about his stock options. They were standing on their lawns, holding their morning coffees, watching the spectacle. Mrs. Abernathy from next door was actually filming with her phone. Patrick covered his face with his hands. "This is a nightmare," he moaned. Then his phone rang. It was in the pocket of his robe. He pulled it out. I watched on the screen as he looked at the caller ID. He froze. "Answer it, Patrick," I whispered to the empty hotel room. On the screen, I saw him slide his finger across the glass. He put the phone to his ear. "Vanessa," he screamed. "Vanessa, are you doing this? Make them stop. They locked us out. They stole everything." I spoke into my phone, my voice calm and steady. "Hello, Patrick. I hear you are having a rough morning. Vanessa, tell them it is a mistake," Patrick pleaded. "Tell them I own the house." The palm. "They said I sold it. They said I signed it away." "You did, Patrick," I said. "Remember the limo. Remember the envelope. You were so eager to start your new life. You didn't want to read the boring details." Silence on the other end. Then a gasp. "You set me up. You tricked me." "I did not trick you, Patrick," I said coldly. "I gave you exactly what you asked for. Do you remember what you said to me? Do you remember your exact words?" "Vanessa, please," Patrick begged. "I am standing outside in my bathrobe. The neighbors are watching. Haley is wearing a sheet. We have nothing." "Exactly," I said. "What?" Patrick asked. "You said you would leave with nothing," I reminded him. "You said Haley didn't care about money. You said she didn't need material things. You said you would walk away with nothing but your pride." I paused, letting the words sink in. "I am just helping you keep your promise, Patrick. You wanted nothing. Now you have nothing." "Vanessa, this is cruel." Patrick sobbed. "This is insane. Where are we supposed to go? We don't have our wallets. We don't have our car keys. The cars are in the garage," I said. "And since they are on the property, they are part of the sale. I believe the new owner plans to sell them at auction." "You took the cars," Patrick screamed. "I took what was mine," I corrected him. "The house, the cars, the furniture, the life you thought you were too good for. It is all gone, Patrick." I watched him on the screen. He slumped against the door, sliding down until he was sitting on the welcome mat. The same mat he had walked over triumphantly with his mistress just 48 hours ago. Haley was yelling at him now, hitting his shoulder. "Do something, Patrick. Call an Uber. Get us out of here." He looked at her helplessly. "I can't," he whispered. "My wallet is inside. My cards are inside." I heard Haley's scream through the phone. It was a sound of pure selfish frustration. "Vanessa," Patrick said, his voice broken. "Please, just tell them to let me get my clothes. Just a suit. I have a board meeting today. I cannot go to the board meeting in a bathrobe." "Oh, the board meeting," I said. "I wouldn't worry about that, Patrick." "What do you mean?" he asked. "I mean, you probably won't be needed there either," I said. "But we can talk about that later. Right now you should focus on finding a pair of pants." I hung up the phone. I watched the screen for one more minute. I saw Patrick staring at the disconnected phone. I saw the sheriff gesturing for them to move off the porch and onto the sidewalk. They walked down the driveway, the gravel crunching under Patrick's slippers, Haley's bare feet struggling on the stones. They reached the sidewalk. They stood there, two figures in sleepwear, shivering in the morning sun. The moving crew began to carry boxes out of the house. I saw a man carrying Patrick's golf clubs. Another was carrying the espresso machine. Mrs. Abernathy waved at them from across the street. Patrick turned his back, unable to face her. I closed the iPad. My coffee was cold, but I didn't care. He was out. The parasite had been removed from the host. I stood up and walked to the window of my suite overlooking the Manhattan skyline. The first phase was complete. He was homeless. He was humiliated. He was stripped of his possessions. But he still had his title. He still had his company. He still thought he was the CEO of Kingstream. I checked the time. It was 8:30. The emergency board meeting I had called was scheduled for 10 o'clock. I walked to the closet and pulled out my suit. It was a white suit, sharp and structural, the color of mourning in some cultures, but the color of new beginnings in mine. I had stripped him of his shelter. Now it was time to strip him of his identity. I picked up my phone and dialed the car service. "Bring the car around," I said. "I am ready to go to headquarters." Patrick was standing on a sidewalk in the Hamptons with nothing. By noon, he would wish he had stayed there, because what was waiting for him in the boardroom was far worse than a sheriff with an eviction notice. I grabbed my briefcase, the one containing the original incorporation papers of Kingstream, and walked out of the hotel room. The game was not over. We were just moving to the next level. And this time, I wasn't playing silent partner anymore. I watched the GPS dot on my iPad move away from the house and settle at the Mandarin Oriental. It was a predictable choice. Of course, Patrick would run there. It was where we had stayed on our wedding night. It was where he held his power lunches. He thought it was his second home. He was about to find out that without the credit limit, I provided he was just another vagrant in a bathrobe wandering through a five-star lobby. I could imagine the scene perfectly. Patrick King, the tech visionary, walking through the revolving brass doors, wearing nothing but his silk robe and velvet slippers. Haley trailing behind him, wrapped in a stolen bedsheet, shivering in the air-conditioned luxury. They probably thought they looked eccentric, like rock stars trashing a hotel suite. But to the staff at the Mandarin, they just looked like a liability. Fortunately, Patrick had managed to grab his wallet from the nightstand before the sheriff threw him out. He probably thought it was his salvation. He probably thought that little piece of leather contained his dignity. He was wrong. It was just a graveyard of useless plastic. I switched my view to the banking alerts on my second monitor. I wanted to see the exact moment reality hit him. Inside the hotel lobby, the scent of white tea and expensive lilies filled the air. Patrick marched up to the front desk, bypassing the line of tourists. He slammed his hand on the marble counter, trying to project the authority he had lost on the sidewalk 20 minutes ago. The concierge, a man named Henri, who had known us for years, looked up. His professional mask didn't slip, but I knew he was internally recoiling. "Mr. King," Henri said, his voice smooth but guarded. "This is a surprise. And Ms. Haley, we need a room," Henri Patrick barked. "The presidential suite, and I need someone to go to the boutique downstairs and bring up a selection of suits. Armani, size 42 regular, and a dress for the lady, something expensive." Henri looked at the bedsheet wrapped around Haley. "Of course, Mr. King," Henri said, typing slowly on his keyboard. "And how long will you be staying with us?" "Indefinitely," Patrick said loud enough for the people in the lobby to hear. "I am between homes right now. Just get me the key. I need a shower and a scotch." "Certainly, Sir," Henri said. "For the presidential suite, we will need a credit card for the incidentals and the deposit. The rate is $8,000 a night." Patrick reached into the pocket of his robe. He pulled out the heavy titanium card, the Kingstream corporate card. The card that was backed by the company's operating capital, the company that I owned 51% of. "Put it on the corporate account," Patrick said, sliding the metal card across the marble. It made a heavy, authoritative sound. Henri picked it up. He inserted it into the chip reader. I watched my screen. The alert popped up instantly. "Attempted transaction Mandarin Oriental. Amount $25,000. Hold. Status denied." Henri watched his screen too. He frowned slightly. "I am sorry," Mr. King, Henri said softly. "The card has been declined." Patrick laughed, a loud, nervous bark of a laugh. "That is ridiculous," he said. "It is an unlimited card. It must be a security flag because of the location. Run it again." Henri ran it again. Denied. "Mr. King, the system says unauthorized user," Henri said. "It appears the card has been reported as compromised." Patrick's face turned a shade of red that matched the carpet. Compromised, he sputtered. I am the CEO. I authorize it. Who reported it compromised? I took a sip of my water. I had. 10 minutes ago. As the majority shareholder, I had flagged all executive spending for forensic review. Patrick snatched the card back. Fine, he snapped. Bank error. Incompetent idiots. Here. He pulled out another card, his personal platinum visa. This was his own money, his salary, his savings. Use this one, he said, throwing it on the counter, and bring up a bottle of Dom Perignon for the trouble. I leaned closer to my screen. This was the moment. This was the checkmate. Earlier that morning, while Patrick was arguing with the sheriff, my sister-in-law Jordan had walked into the courthouse. She had filed an emergency motion for a status quo order regarding marital assets. Since the divorce was contested, and since there were allegations of financial dissipation thanks to Patrick spending $50,000 on Haley's jewelry last week, the judge had granted a temporary freeze on all liquid assets. Patrick didn't know it yet, but every penny he had was currently sitting in legal purgatory. Henri inserted the platinum card. I waited. 1 second. 2 seconds. Transaction status failed. Code account frozen. Court order. Henri looked at the screen. He looked at Patrick. The professional warmth evaporated from his eyes. Mr. King Henri said, his voice dropping to a whisper to avoid causing a scene. This card has also been declined. The code indicates a court-ordered freeze. Patrick froze. What did you say? He whispered. A court order, Henri repeated. I cannot process this card. Do you have another form of payment? Patrick started digging through his wallet. He pulled out a debit card. Declined. He pulled out an airline rewards card. Declined. He pulled out a gas station credit card. Declined. Cards started piling up on the marble counter like a losing hand of poker. Haley, who had been standing behind him shivering and looking at her phone, stepped forward. Patrick, what is going on? She hissed. Her voice wasn't sweet anymore. It was sharp and edged with panic. Why aren't the cards working? It is a mistake, Patrick muttered, his hands shaking as he fumbled with the plastic. Vanessa, she did something. She hacked my accounts. Sir Henri said, his patience wearing thin. If you cannot provide a valid method of payment, I cannot check you in. We have a dress code in the lobby and... Do you know who I am? Patrick shouted, losing control. I am Patrick King. I have spent millions in this hotel. You know I am good for it. Just give me the room key and I will wire the money tomorrow. I am afraid I cannot do that, Sir Henri said, signaling to the large man in the suit standing near the elevators. Policy is strict. No payment, no room. Haley grabbed Patrick's arm. Her nails dug into the silk of his robe. You said you were a billionaire, she hissed. You said you had $50 million in liquid assets. Why can't you pay for a hotel room? I do. Patrick pleaded, looking at her with desperate eyes. I do have the money, Haley. It is just inaccessible right now. Inaccessible, Haley mocked. You are standing in a bathrobe in the middle of New York City and you can't buy me a sandwich, let alone a suite. What kind of CEO are you? The security guard arrived. He was a mountain of a man named Rocco. Mr. King Henri said, nodding to Rocco, I am going to have to ask you to leave. You are disturbing the other guests. Leave? Patrick gasped. But we have nowhere to go. That is not our problem, Sir Rocco said, stepping forward. Please come this way. Patrick tried to stand his ground. I am not leaving until I speak to the manager. I am the manager on duty, Henri said, cold as ice. And you are trespassing. Rocco, escort them out. Rocco grabbed Patrick's elbow. It wasn't gentle. It was the grip used for drunks and troublemakers. Don't touch me, Patrick yelled, flailing his arm. Haley backed away from him. She looked at the people staring. She looked at the security guard manhandling her billionaire boyfriend. She looked at the pile of rejected credit cards on the counter. I watched her face on the security feed. It was the look of an investor realizing the stock has hit zero. Haley, let's go, Patrick said, trying to maintain some dignity as he was shoved toward the revolving doors. We will go to the St. Regis. They know me there. Haley didn't move. The St. Regis, she scoffed. Patrick, you can't even afford a taxi to the St. Regis. Come on, babe, don't be like that, Patrick pleaded, reaching for her hand. Don't touch me, Haley snapped, pulling her sheet tighter around her. This is humiliating. You promised me a life of luxury. You promised me freedom. This is pathetic." "Ma'am, you too," Rocco said, gesturing to the door. They were pushed out onto the sidewalk. The revolving door spun behind them, sealing them out of the world of comfort and returning them to the gritty reality of the street. I watched the street camera now. Patrick stood on the concrete in his slippers. A tourist walked by and took a photo of him. Patrick tried to cover his face with his hand. Haley was standing a few feet away from him. She wasn't looking at him with love. She was looking at him with disgust. "So that is it," she said, her voice carrying over the noise of traffic. "You really have nothing." "It is temporary," Patrick insisted. "Just a few days. I will fix it at the board meeting. Once I fire Vanessa, I will get control back." "You better," Haley said, "because I didn't sign up to be homeless." She turned and started walking down the block, her bare feet slapping against the pavement. "Where are you going?" Patrick called after her. "To find a Starbucks," Haley yelled back. "At least I have $5 on my app." Patrick stood alone in front of the hotel. He looked down at his useless wallet. He looked up at the sky. I sat back in my chair at the Four Seasons. He had tried to buy respect with plastic and found out that without me, he had no currency. He thought the hotel was hell. He was wrong. Hell was knowing that in 1 hour, he had to walk into his own company looking like a lunatic, and I would be there waiting to strip the last thing he had left, his job. I closed the laptop. I picked up my purse. It was time to go to the office. By 11 o'clock that morning, Patrick King, the man who had been featured on the cover of Tech Monthly as a visionary, was sitting on a stained beige mattress in a motel room that smelled of stale cigarette smoke and bleach. They had not gone to the St. Regis. They had not even gone to a Holiday Inn. Thanks to a crumpled $50 bill Haley had hidden inside her phone case, the only liquidity they had left between them, they had checked into the Blue Moon Motor Inn on the outskirts of Queens. I was not there to see the peeling wallpaper or the cockroach that I imagined was currently crawling across the carpet, but I didn't need to be. The GPS dot on Patrick's phone told me exactly where they were, and my imagination filled in the rest with satisfying clarity. I sat in the back of my town car, watching the city fly by as I headed toward Kingstream headquarters. I opened the audio feed from Patrick's phone. I had installed a parental monitoring app on his device 3 months ago, ostensibly to track his fitness data, but really to track his infidelity. Now it was my window into his downfall. The audio was crackly, but I could hear the distinct hum of a cheap air conditioner rattling in the window. "Come on, pick up, Patrick's voice hissed. He was making calls. He was trying to find a lifeline. I listened as he dialed Marcus, the VP of sales. Marcus was Patrick's fraternity brother. They played golf every Sunday. Marcus was the kind of guy who laughed at all of Patrick's jokes and constantly told him he was a genius. "Hello?" Marcus sounded wary. "Marcus, thank God," Patrick said, his voice desperate. "Listen, buddy, I am in a bit of a jam. Vanessa went crazy. She locked me out of the accounts. It is a whole legal mess. I need a wire transfer. Just 10 grand. I will pay you back double tomorrow." Silence on the line. Then a heavy sigh. "Patrick, I can't," Marcus said. "What do you mean you can't?" Patrick snapped. "You are worth $5 million. I gave you that bonus last year. It is not about the money." Patrick, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "It is the investigation." "Investigation?" Patrick asked. "What investigation?" "Word is out," Marcus said. "The CFO sent a memo this morning. Something about forensic accounting, embezzlement. The SEC is involved. They say anyone who aids you financially could be considered an accomplice to money laundering." My lips curled into a smile. I had not called the SEC, but I had whispered the word embezzlement to the head of HR before I left the hotel. In the corporate world, a rumor travels faster than light and it destroys faster than fire. "Marcus, that is a lie," Patrick screamed. "Vanessa is making it up. I can't take the risk, man," Marcus said. "Don't call me again until this blows over." And Patrick, "What?" "If you are coming to the office today, use the back entrance. We have clients coming in." The line went dead. Patrick slammed the phone down on the rickety nightstand. "Damn it," he shouted. "Coward. Traitor." I listened as he dialed again. And again. He called his golf buddy. Voicemail. He called his college roommate. Blocked. He called the venture capitalist who had once begged to invest. The assistant said he was in a meeting indefinitely. They were all closing ranks. They smelled blood in the water. Patrick thought his power came from his charisma. He didn't realize his charisma was entirely subsidized by my checkbook. Without the money, he was just a liability. The room went silent for a moment, except for the rattle of the air conditioner. Then I heard a new sound. It was the sound of a plastic bottle being crunched. "This place is disgusting." Haley's voice cut through the static. She didn't sound like a muse anymore. She sounded like a bratty child who had been denied dessert. "It is just for a few hours," Patrick muttered, "until I get to the office." "There is a bug on the wall," Haley screeched. "A literal bug. Patrick, I am wearing a bed sheet in a room with bugs. You said we were going to a penthouse. You said you were a king." "I am a king," Patrick snapped. "I am just temporarily exiled." "Exiled," Haley scoffed. "You are broke. There is a difference." "I am not broke," Patrick yelled. "I have millions in stock. I have the company." "Do you?" Haley asked. "Because your friends don't seem to think so. That guy on the phone said embezzlement." "Did you steal money, Patrick? Are you going to jail?" "I didn't steal anything," Patrick defended himself. "Vanessa is framing me. She is jealous. She is trying to destroy me because she knows I am better than her." Haley laughed. It was a cold, harsh sound. "Better than her," she mocked. "Patrick. She just kicked you out of your own house without lifting a finger. She froze your cards. She turned your friends against you. And you are sitting here in your pajamas crying. She looks pretty smart to me." "Shut up," Haley Patrick warned. "You are supposed to be supportive. You are the one who told me to leave her. You said her energy was blocking me." "I didn't tell you to sign away the house," Haley shouted back. "I didn't tell you to be an idiot and not read the contract. Who signs a divorce paper without reading it?" "I trusted her," Patrick said quietly. "Well, that was stupid, wasn't it?" Haley said. "I heard the rustle of cheap polyester sheets." "I am hungry," Haley announced. "Go get me some food." "I can't go out there," Patrick said. "Look at me. I am wearing slippers, and we have no money." "Use your phone," Haley said. "Download an app. Steal something. I don't care. I am starving. I can't." Patrick said, his voice breaking. "Then you are useless," Haley screamed. The word hung in the air. Useless. The muse had fallen. The goddess of minimalism who claimed she didn't care about material things was now screaming because she couldn't get a croissant. "You are a fraud, Patrick," Haley continued, her voice rising with every sentence. "You walked around like you owned the world. You made me believe you were this powerful alpha male. But you are just a little boy playing dress-up with his wife's money, aren't you?" "That is not true," Patrick said, but his voice was weak. "It is true," Haley said. "Look at you. You are nothing without her. You can't even book a hotel room. You can't even buy me lunch. You are pathetic." "I am not pathetic," Patrick roared. "Then fix it," Haley screamed. "Fix it right now, or I am walking out that door, and I am calling my ex-boyfriend. At least he has a job at a car dealership. At least he has a car." The silence that followed was heavy. I could feel Patrick's humiliation radiating through the phone. He had blown up his marriage, his home, and his reputation for this woman. And it took less than 4 hours of adversity for her to trade him in for a used car salesman. "Fine," Patrick said. His voice was cold now, hard. "Fine, what?" Haley asked. "I will fix it," Patrick said. "I am going to the office." "You can't go to the office like that," Haley said. "You look like a mental patient." "I have a suit there," Patrick said, "in my private office. I keep a spare tuxedo and a change of clothes for galas. And I have a safe." "A safe?" Haley asked, perking up. "Yes," Patrick said. "The CEO Petty Cash Fund. I keep $50,000 in cash there for emergencies, unmarked bills, for bribes or unforeseen circumstances." "50,000, Haley repeated, and I could practically hear her drooling. "Yes," Patrick said. "I will sneak in the back entrance. I will go up to my office. I will get the suit and the cash. Then we will go to the St. Regis. We will pay cash, and then I will fire Vanessa and take back my company." "Okay," Haley said, her voice instantly sweet again. "Okay, baby, go get the money. I will wait here. But hurry. The bugs are looking at me." I smiled in the back of my car. The petty cash fund. Of course. Patrick always forgot the details. He forgot that the petty cash fund was technically company property. He forgot that taking it for personal use while under investigation for embezzlement would be the final nail in his legal coffin. But more importantly, he forgot who had the combination to that safe. He thought it was his secret stash. He didn't know that I was the one who balanced the books every month. I knew exactly how much was in there, and I knew exactly where he was going. He was going to the office, to his throne room. He thought he would find salvation there. He thought he would find a fresh suit and a stack of cash to buy back his mistress's affection. He didn't know that I was already pulling up to the curb of the Kingstream building. I checked my watch. 10:45 a.m. The emergency board meeting I had called was set to begin in 15 minutes. I tapped the driver on the shoulder. "Pull around to the back entrance," I said. The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror. "The loading dock, ma'am." "Yes," I said. "I want to make sure the door is unlocked." Patrick was coming for his $50,000. He was coming to steal from the company he thought he owned. I wasn't going to stop him. In fact, I was counting on it. Because when he walked into that office, he wouldn't just find an empty safe. He would find the entire board of directors waiting to witness a crime in progress. I disconnected the audio feed from his phone. I didn't need to hear anymore. The rat was in the maze and he was running straight for the trap. I stepped out of the car. The Kingstream building towered above me, a glass and steel monument to the future, my future. I walked to the security desk. The guard stood up instantly. "Mrs. King," he said, "we weren't expecting you." "I know," I said, flashing my ID. "I am here for the board meeting." "And Frank?" "Yes, ma'am." "Mr. King might be arriving shortly," I said. "He has lost his access badge. If you see him on the cameras entering through the loading dock, let him in." "Let him in?" Frank asked, confused. "But the memo said—" "Let him in," I repeated. "Do not stop him. Do not warn him. Just let him come up to the executive floor." Frank looked at me. He saw the steel in my eyes. He nodded. "Understood, ma'am." I walked toward the elevator. Patrick wanted a reality check. He wanted to know what the real world was like. The real world was cruel. The real world was unforgiving. And in the real world, when you try to rob a bank, you don't get a hotel room. You get handcuffs. I pressed the button for the top floor. The doors slid shut. I adjusted my blazer. I checked my reflection in the polished steel. I looked like a CEO. Patrick was on his way, and I was ready to welcome him home. The boardroom on the 45th floor of Kingstream Tower was designed to intimidate. It was a cavernous space with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the Manhattan skyline, a view that was supposed to remind everyone in the room that they were masters of the universe. In the center of the room sat a long table made of black marble, cold and unforgiving. 12 leather chairs surrounded it, each one costing more than a compact car. Usually these chairs were filled with men who laughed too loud and took up too much space. Men who patted Patrick on the back and told him he was a visionary while secretly hoping his stock price would jump so they could cash out. But today, the room was silent. I sat at the head of the table, the chairman's seat. It was the seat Patrick usually occupied. He liked to swivel in it, leaning back with his hands behind his head, projecting an air of relaxed dominance. I sat differently. I sat with my spine straight, my hands folded on the marble surface in front of me. To my right sat Jordan, my sister-in-law and legal counsel. She had her laptop open, her fingers hovering over the keys, ready to record every second of what was about to happen. Around the table, the other 10 board members sat in uncomfortable silence. These were men I had known for years socially, men who had eaten at my dinner table, men who had ignored my opinions on the economy, men who had treated me like a decorative flower arrangement. Now they couldn't look me in the eye. They had seen the documents Jordan had emailed them an hour ago. They knew about the shell companies. They knew about the debt structure. They knew that the woman they had dismissed as a housewife effectively owned their careers. The air conditioner hummed a low, steady drone. It was the only sound in the room. Then we heard it. It started in the hallway. A commotion. The sound of a receptionist's voice rising in panic, followed by a heavy thud against a wall. "Sir, you cannot go in there," the receptionist cried out. "Sir, please, get out of my way!" Patrick's voice roared. It was muffled by the soundproof glass, but the rage was unmistakable. "Do you know who I am? I am the CEO. I built this building." I looked at Jordan. She gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. The show was beginning. The double doors of the boardroom flew open with a violence that made the heavy glass shudder in its frame. Patrick King stormed into the room. The visual impact was shocking even to me. I had seen him leave the house in a robe earlier, but seeing him here in this sanctuary of corporate power was entirely different. He was still wearing the silk robe, but it was stained with dirt from the street. He had managed to put on a pair of oversized gym shorts underneath, likely retrieved from the trunk of his car, but he was still wearing the velvet slippers. His hair was wild, standing up in tufts where he had run his hands through it in desperation. His eyes were bloodshot and wide, darting around the room with the frenzied energy of a trapped animal. He didn't look like a visionary. He looked like a madman. "Where is Marcus?" he screamed, ignoring the stunned silence of the board. "Marcus, I need the key." He marched toward the far end of the table where Marcus, the CFO, was sitting. Marcus shrank back in his chair, looking terrified. "Patrick, calm down," Marcus stammered, holding his hands up. "You can't be here like this." "Give me the key!" Patrick yelled, slamming his fist onto the marble table. "The petty cash safe. I need the $50,000 now. And call the bank. Tell them to unfreeze the accounts. Tell them it is a mistake." "Patrick, please." Marcus set his eyes darting toward me. "I don't have time for please," Patrick spat. He was panting heavily, sweat beading on his forehead. "I need cash. I need a suit. I have a meeting with—" He stopped. He had finally turned his head enough to see the other end of the table. He froze. He blinked rapidly, as if his brain was refusing to process the image before him. He saw Jordan first. His brother's wife, the woman he had always called uptight and boring. "Jordan," he said, his voice dropping to a confused whisper. "What are you doing here? Are you representing me? Did you come to fix the legal mess?" Jordan didn't smile. She didn't speak. She just looked at him over the rim of her glasses. Then Patrick's eyes moved to the left, to the head of the table, to the chairman's seat. He saw me. I was wearing my white suit, impeccable and sharp. My hair was pulled back in a sleek bun. I was the picture of control. Patrick's confusion morphed into something ugly. A sneer curled his lip, the familiar expression of a man who believes he is superior to every woman in the room, regardless of the circumstances. "Vanessa," he said, letting out a short, incredulous laugh. He looked around at the other board members, shaking his head, as if asking them to share in the joke. "What is she doing here?" he asked the room. "Did she come to beg?" He turned back to me, taking a step closer. The smell of stale sweat and desperation rolled off him. "Look, V," he said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I hated so much. "I know you are upset. I know I was harsh this morning. But you can't just barge into a board meeting. This is for grown-ups. This is business." I stared at him, my face a mask of indifference. "Did you bring coffee?" he asked. "Is that it?" "Did you realize you made a mistake and brought coffee to apologize? That is cute, V, but we are in the middle of a crisis, so leave the coffee and get out. I will deal with you later." The room went deadly silent. Even the air conditioner seemed to hold its breath. Marcus looked down at his lap. The other board members shifted uncomfortably. They knew what Patrick didn't. They knew that the ground beneath his feet had already crumbled. I slowly leaned forward. I placed my elbows on the table and interlaced my fingers. "I didn't bring coffee." "Patrick," I said. My voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the room. Patrick rolled his eyes. "Then what? Did you bring my dry cleaning?" "Seriously, Vanessa. Look at me. I am in a robe. I need my suit. Go get it from my office. Be useful for once." I stood up. The movement was slow and deliberate. As I rose, the other board members instinctively straightened in their chairs. It was a subtle shift in body language, a recognition of authority. Patrick stepped back, slightly surprised by my height. In my heels, I was almost eye level with him. "I am not here to fetch your suit, Patrick," I said, "and I am not here to bring coffee." Then why are you sitting in my chair, he snapped, pointing a shaking finger at the head of the table. That is the chairman's seat. You have no right to be there. Actually, I said, I have every right. I picked up the remote control for the presentation screen on the wall behind me. I pressed a button. The screen flickered to life. Projected in high definition was a complex organizational chart. At the bottom was Kingstream. Above it was a web of holding companies. And at the very top, glowing in bright blue, was a single entity, Aurora Ventures. And next to Aurora Ventures was a name, Vanessa King. Patrick squinted at the screen. He looked confused. What is this? He asked. What is Aurora Ventures? That is the VC fund, the angel investor. Yes, I said. The investor who gave you your seed money. The investor who bailed you out 3 times when you overspent on marketing. The investor who owns 51% of Kingstream's voting stock. Patrick shook his head, trying to clear the fog. No, that is impossible. Aurora is some guy in Silicon Valley. I spoke to him on the phone. You spoke to a hired representative. I corrected him. You spoke to a voice actor I paid to stroke your ego. But the money, Patrick, the money was always mine. I gestured to the chart. I own this company, Patrick. I always have. You were just the face on the brochure. Patrick looked at the screen, then at me, then at the board members. You knew he screamed at Marcus. You knew about this. Marcus nodded slowly. We found out this morning, Patrick, when Mrs. King called the meeting. Mrs. King, Patrick laughed hysterically. Mrs. King is a housewife. She arranges flowers. She doesn't run tech companies. I pressed another button on the remote. The screen changed. Now it showed a scanned document. It was the employment contract Patrick had signed 10 years ago. Look at Clause 14, I said. The moral clause. Patrick stared at the wall. It says that the CEO can be terminated immediately for cause if his personal conduct brings disrepute to the company or its shareholders. I recited from memory. So I asked, So what? Patrick spat. I haven't done anything. I pointed to the other screen, the one displaying a live feed of Twitter. The trending topic was #KingstreamMeltdown. Photos of Patrick being evicted in his bathrobe were everywhere. A video of him screaming at the hotel staff was going viral. You are a laughingstock, Patrick, I said. You have destroyed the brand's image in less than 4 hours. And as the majority shareholder, I cannot allow that to continue. I looked him dead in the eye. So to answer your question, Patrick, no, I am not here to bring coffee. I paused, letting the silence stretch until it was painful. I am waiting for the former CEO to hand over his keys. Patrick stood frozen. His mouth hung open. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a dawning horror. Former, he whispered. Yes, I said. You are fired, Patrick. Effective immediately. No, he screamed, lunging toward the table. You can't fire me. I am the founder. It is my name on the building. It is my money in the bank, I countered, my voice sharp as a whip. And without my money, your name is just graffiti. Jordan stood up then. She slid a single piece of paper across the marble table toward him. Notice of termination, she said coldly. Please sign here to acknowledge receipt. Or don't. It doesn't matter. Security is already on the way up. Patrick looked at the paper. Then he looked at me. The woman he had discarded. The woman he had underestimated. You planned this, he whispered. You planned this whole thing. I didn't plan for you to cheat, Patrick, I said. I didn't plan for you to humiliate me, but I did plan for the day you would try to leave me with nothing. I sat back down in the chairman's chair. Now, I said, turning my attention to the board members and dismissing him completely. I believe we have an agenda to get through. Item 1, rebranding. Patrick stood there, ignoring the paper, shaking with rage. Get out, I said without looking at him. He didn't move. He couldn't move. He was a man watching his own funeral. Security, I said into the intercom. Please remove the intruder from the boardroom. The doors opened again. This time it wasn't a receptionist. It was 3 large guards. Patrick looked at them. Then he looked at me one last time. There was no love left in his eyes, only pure, unadulterated hatred. You will regret this, Vanessa, he hissed as the guards grabbed his arms. I will burn this place to the ground. "You don't have any matches, Patrick," I said calmly. As they dragged him out, screaming about his suits and his money, I turned to Marcus. "Does anyone want coffee?" I asked. "I believe we have a lot of work to do." "Wait," I said, my voice slicing through the chaotic noise of the boardroom. The security guards froze. They were halfway to the double doors holding Patrick King by his arms. My husband was thrashing against their grip, his silk robe slipping off his shoulder, revealing the pale skin underneath. He looked disheveled and wild, but his eyes were still burning with that delusional fire. He still thought this was a mistake. He still thought he could talk his way out of it. "Bring him back to the table," I commanded. "I want him to see this." The guards looked at each other. Then they dragged Patrick back toward the black marble table. He stumbled, his velvet slippers scuffing against the plush carpet. They forced him into a chair at the far end opposite me. He sat there panting heavily, his chest heaving, his hair sticking up in sweaty tufts. "You are enjoying this, aren't you, Vanessa?" He spat, his voice trembling with rage. "You think this is a game. You think you can embarrass me in front of my board." "It is not your board, Patrick," I said calmly. And it never was. I picked up the remote control again. I pointed it at the massive screen behind me. "Look closely, Patrick. I want you to understand exactly who you have been sleeping with, not Haley. Me. I want you to see the person you called a bored housewife." I clicked the button. The organizational chart on the screen zoomed in. The blue box labeled Aurora Ventures expanded until it filled the entire display. "You know this name," I said. "Aurora Ventures. The angel investor that saved you in 2018 when your servers crashed and you lost half your client base. The investor that injected $5 million in 2020 when you wanted to acquire that rival startup." Patrick looked at the screen. "Of course I know them," he sneered. "They are a consortium. A group of silent partners from Silicon Valley. I have spoken to their representative, Mr. Henderson. He believes in my vision. He knows I'm a genius." "Mr. Henderson is a voice actor I hired from an agency in London," I said. "I paid him $200 an hour to listen to your rants and tell you what you wanted to hear." Patrick blinked. "What?" "And the consortium," I continued, "it does not exist. There is no group. There is no Silicon Valley money." I clicked the remote again. A new document appeared on the screen. It was the Articles of Incorporation for Aurora Ventures filed in the state of Delaware 10 years ago. "Look at the signature line, Patrick." He squinted. The screen was massive, the resolution crystal clear. The signature at the bottom was elegant and sharp. Vanessa King. It was my signature. I watched the realization hit him. It wasn't a sudden strike. It was a slow, creeping horror. His mouth opened slightly. His eyes darted from the screen to me, then back to the screen. "No," he whispered. "That is fake. You forged it. You don't have that kind of money. You are just Vanessa." "I am just Vanessa," I repeated slowly. "The Vanessa who inherited a shipping fortune from her father. The Vanessa whose family built empires while yours was still trying to figure out how to pay rent. You never asked about my family's trust fund, Patrick. You were too busy talking about yourself. You assumed my money was just cute pin money. You assumed I bought shoes and handbags." I leaned forward, staring him down from the head of the table. "I didn't buy handbags, Patrick. I bought you." I clicked the remote again. A spreadsheet appeared. It showed a column of wire transfers, dates, amounts, October 2018, $2 million. March 2019, $1.5 million. December 2021, $4 million. "Every time you failed, I was there," I said. "Every time you needed a bailout, I wrote the check. I laundered it through Aurora Ventures because I knew your ego couldn't handle the truth. I knew you needed to feel like a big man who made it on his own. So I let you play pretend. I let you hold the title of CEO. I let you take the credit for the magazines." I paused, letting the numbers burn into his retinas. "But legally, Patrick, I own 60% of the equity in Kingstream. I am the majority shareholder. I am the chairman. I am the owner. And you are just an employee who has become a liability." Patrick was shaking his head violently now. No. This is a lie. I built this. I designed the code. You designed the front end, I corrected him. My developers designed the back end. You were the mascot, Patrick. And mascots are replaceable. Something inside him snapped. The reality was too heavy, the humiliation too total. The image of himself he had built for 40 years, the self-made man, the genius, the god, was shattering into dust, and he couldn't handle it. He let out a guttural scream. It wasn't human. It was the sound of a wounded beast. "You bitch!" he screamed. "You lying, manipulating bitch!" He lunged. He didn't stand up gracefully. He launched himself across the table, scattering the heavy crystal water pitchers. He scrambled over the marble, clawing his way toward me, his eyes wide with murderous intent. He wanted to hurt me. He wanted to silence the voice that was telling him the truth. The board members gasped, recoiling in their chairs. Marcus covered his head with his hands. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I sat perfectly still, watching him come, because I knew he would never reach me. Before he could get past the centerpiece, a blur of motion intercepted him. The head of security, a man named Frank, who had worked for my father for 20 years, tackled Patrick midair. They hit the floor with a bone-jarring thud. "Get off me," Patrick screamed, thrashing and kicking. "I will kill her. I will kill you all. This is my company." 2 more guards were on him instantly. They pinned him to the plush carpet. One guard pressed a knee into the small of his back. Another twisted his arm behind him, forcing his face into the floor. The silk robe was torn. His bare legs were kicking uselessly. He looked pathetic. A man who thought he was a king, now reduced to a brawler on the floor. "Hold him," I said, my voice cold and steady. I stood up and walked around the table. I stopped a few feet away from where he was pinned. I looked down at him. His cheek was smashed against the carpet, his breath coming in ragged sobs. "Jordan read it," I said. Jordan stood up. She smoothed her skirt and picked up a document from her folder. She walked over and stood beside me. She looked down at Patrick with zero sympathy. "This is a formal notice of termination for cause." Jordan read her voice clear and precise, like a judge delivering a sentence. "Pursuant to Section 4, Paragraph 2 of the Kingstream Executive Employment Agreement, specifically the Moral Clause." Patrick groaned against the floor. "Let me go." Jordan continued reading, ignoring him. "The Moral Clause states that the CEO may be terminated immediately and without severance if he engages in conduct that involves moral turpitude, public scandal, or behavior that materially damages the reputation of the firm." She paused and looked at the guards. Mr. King's public eviction for non-payment of debts, his altercation with hotel staff, which is currently trending on social media with over 2 million views, and his attempted physical assault of the chairman of the board in the presence of witnesses constitutes a gross violation of this clause. Jordan dropped the paper. It fluttered down and landed next to Patrick's face. "You are fired, Patrick," Jordan said, closing the file. "Effective immediately. You forfeit all unvested stock options. You forfeit your severance package. You forfeit your company car and your corporate housing." Patrick stopped struggling. He lay there limp under the weight of the guards. He stared at the paper next to his eye. "Fired," he whispered. "With cause," I added. "Which means you get nothing. Just like you promised." I looked at Frank, the head of security. "Get him out of my building," I said. "And Frank, take his picture. I want it at the front desk. If he tries to enter this building again, call the police and have him arrested for trespassing." "Yes, ma'am," Frank said. They hauled him up. Patrick didn't fight anymore. The fight was gone. He hung between the guards like a rag doll. His robe was open. His dignity was gone. His future was erased. He looked at me one last time as they dragged him toward the door. His eyes were empty. "Vanessa," he croaked, "please. I have nowhere to go. Haley left me. I have no money. I have no home." I looked at him. I remembered the way he had laughed when he signed the divorce papers. I remembered the way he had looked at Haley on stage. I remembered the nothing he had promised. "You have your freedom, Patrick," I said. "Isn't that what you wanted? You are free of me. You are free of the old energy. Go find your muse. Maybe she has a couch you can sleep on." I turned my back on him. "Get him out," I ordered. The doors opened and they dragged him into the hallway. I heard his wailing fade as the elevator doors closed. The boardroom was silent again. The water pitcher lay overturned on the table, a puddle spreading across the black marble. I walked back to the head of the table. I sat down in the chairman's seat. I looked at the 10 men sitting around me. They were pale. They were sweating. They had just watched the execution of their friend, and they knew I held the axe. Marcus, the CFO, cleared his throat nervously. "Mrs. King," he said, his voice shaking. "About the rebranding strategy you mentioned." I looked at him. I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a woman who had just won a war. "Yes, Marcus," I said. "Let's get to work. First thing on the agenda. We are changing the name of the company. Kingstream is dead." I tapped the table. "From now on, we are Aurora." And for the first time in 10 years, the men in the room opened their notebooks and started writing exactly what I told them to. "Wait," I called out. The security guard stopped just outside the boardroom doors. Patrick was sagging between them, his bare feet scraping against the expensive plush carpet of the executive hallway. He looked up at me, hope flickering in his eyes for a split second. Maybe he thought I was changing my mind. Maybe he thought there was still a shred of the wife who used to forgive him for everything. He was wrong. I walked over to him, my heels clicking rhythmically on the floor. I stood close enough to smell the sweat and fear radiating off him, but far enough away that he couldn't touch me. "Frank," I said to the head of security, "before you escort Mr. King from the building, we need to recover company property." Frank nodded. He released one of Patrick's arms and held out a large, calloused hand. "Phone," Frank said. Patrick clutched the phone in his hand, the one he had used to call me from the porch, the one he had used to scream at me in the hotel. "This is my phone," Patrick protested, pulling it against his chest. "It has my contacts, my photos. It is a company-issued device," I said, my voice flat. "Paid for by Kingstream. The data plan is paid for by Kingstream. Even the case you are holding it in was expensed. Hand it over, Patrick." "No," Patrick whined like a child. "I need it. It is my only way to contact anyone." Frank didn't wait for permission. He reached out and pried the phone from Patrick's fingers. Patrick struggled weakly, but against a man of Frank's size, it was useless. Frank slipped the phone into his jacket pocket. "The car keys," I said. "They are in my pocket," Patrick muttered sullenly. Frank reached into the pocket of the torn silk robe. He pulled out the heavy key fob to the Tesla Model X, the car Patrick loved more than he loved people, the car he called his spaceship. "That is my car," Patrick shouted, trying to lunge for the keys. "I customized it." "You customized a leased vehicle," I corrected him. "The lease is in the company's name, and since you are no longer an employee, you are no longer insured to drive it." I took the keys from Frank. The metal felt cool and heavy in my hand. "I will have someone bring your personal items from the car to the curb," I said, "if there are any. Gym shorts, old receipts, but the car stays in the executive garage." Patrick slumped his shoulders. He looked defeated. He looked small. "Is that it?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "Can I go now? Can I just leave with a shred of dignity?" I looked him up and down. I saw the robe. I saw the slippers. And then I saw the glint of gold on his left wrist. "Not yet," I said. I pointed to his wrist. "The watch," I said. Patrick instinctively covered his left wrist with his right hand. His eyes went wide. "No," he gasped. "No, Vanessa, not the Rolex. You gave this to me. It was an anniversary gift." I took a step closer. My eyes locked onto his. "I didn't give that to you, Patrick," I said softly. "You bought it for yourself 3 weeks ago. You told me it was a client gift. You said it was for the CEO of that Japanese firm we were trying to woo." Patrick swallowed hard. "But when the credit card statement came in, I saw the receipt," I continued. "And then I saw it on your wrist today. You bought it with the corporate Amex, $35,000. It was a signing bonus," Patrick stammered. "I deserved it. You were not authorized for a bonus," I said. "That is embezzlement, Patrick. It is theft of company assets. And that watch belongs to Aurora Ventures. Take it off." Patrick backed away until he hit the chest of the guard behind him. "Please," he begged. "It is the only thing I have left. It is worth money. I can sell it. I need money for a hotel. Vanessa, please, don't take the watch." "Frank," I said. Frank stepped forward. "Don't make me do this the hard way, Mr. King," Frank said. Patrick looked at Frank, then at me. He saw no mercy in my eyes. With trembling fingers, he undid the clasp. The heavy gold watch slid off his wrist. He held it for a moment, feeling its weight, feeling the last symbol of his status slipping away. Then Frank took it. Frank handed the watch to me. I held it up to the light. It was a beautiful piece of engineering. Flashy. Ostentatious. Exactly like Patrick. "Thank you," I said, slipping the watch into my blazer pocket. "Now, is there anything else?" I looked at him. He was truly stripped now. No phone, no car, no money, no jewelry, just a man in a dirty bathrobe standing in a hallway he used to command. "The laptop," I asked. I don't have it," Patrick whispered. "It is in the car." "Good," I said. "We will retrieve it." I nodded to the guards. "You can take him now." They grabbed his arms again. This time he didn't fight. He didn't even lift his feet. They had to half carry him toward the elevator bank. I followed them. I wanted to see it through. I wanted to make sure he left the building. We reached the elevators. The doors slid open, revealing a mirrored interior. Patrick stared at his own reflection. He looked like a ghost. We rode down in silence. The numbers on the display ticked down. 40, 30, 20, 10. When the doors opened into the lobby, it was chaos. The news of the firing had already leaked. Employees were gathered in small clusters, whispering. When they saw the security guards dragging the former CEO across the polished marble floor, the whispering stopped. Hundreds of eyes turned to watch. Patrick tried to hide his face. He tried to pull the lapels of his robe together, but there was no hiding. He was walked past the reception desk where he used to flirt with the assistants. He was walked past the security turnstiles he used to breeze through. He was walked past the giant mural of himself that hung in the atrium, a mural I made a mental note to have painted over by tomorrow. The guards reached the revolving doors. They didn't push him through. They opened the side door, the one used for deliveries and trash. Frank shoved him gently but firmly out onto the sidewalk. Patrick stumbled into the harsh daylight of the city. The noise of the street hit him, horn sirens, the shouting of pedestrians. He turned around. He looked through the glass doors. He saw me standing in the center of the lobby, surrounded by his former kingdom. He raised a hand and placed it against the glass. "Vanessa," he mouthed. I didn't move. I didn't wave. I just watched. He had promised to leave with nothing. He had no phone to call for help. He had no money to buy food. He had no car to drive away in. He had no home to go back to. He didn't even have the time on his wrist. He was a blank slate, a zero. He turned away from the glass. He looked left, then right. He took a hesitant step toward the subway entrance, then realized he didn't have a fare card. He stood there on the concrete, paralyzed by the absolute completeness of his loss. I turned to Frank. "Lock the doors," I said, "and cancel his gym membership while you are at it." I turned around and walked back toward the elevators. My heels clicked on the marble, a sound of finality. The strip was complete, the parasite was gone, and I had a company to run. I did not leave the building immediately. I wanted to see the final act of the tragedy I had orchestrated. My driver pulled the Rolls-Royce Phantom around to the corner of the block, just 50 feet from the service entrance where Patrick had been ejected. The tinted windows were pitch black to the outside world, but from the inside, I had a front row seat to the destruction of a man who thought he was invincible. I watched as Haley paced back and forth on the sidewalk. She was still wearing the bedsheet she had fashioned into a makeshift toga, but she had managed to find a pair of cheap flip-flops somewhere, probably discarded by a tourist. She looked ridiculous, a Greek tragedy figure lost in Midtown Manhattan. But her eyes were not tragic. They were hungry. She was watching the doors like a hawk waiting for its prey to emerge with a fresh kill. She expected Patrick to walk out with a suit bag over his shoulder and a briefcase full of $50,000 in untraceable cash. She expected a black car to whisk them away to the St. Regis. She expected the fantasy to resume. Instead, the side door opened and Patrick stumbled out. He did not walk out like a CEO. He was shoved out by the momentum of his own failure. He caught his balance on a fire hydrant, his silk robe flapping in the wind, exposing his pale legs and the gym shorts underneath. He looked disoriented, blinking in the harsh sunlight that reflected off the glass towers surrounding him. Haley stopped pacing. She took a step toward him, her face lighting up with anticipation. Then she stopped. She scanned his hands. Empty. She scanned his shoulder. No suit bag. She scanned his face. Defeat. I lowered the window just an inch to hear the dialogue. The acoustics of the street carried their voices perfectly over the idling engines of the taxis. "Where is it?" Haley asked. Her voice was sharp, demanding. "Where is the money, Patrick?" Patrick looked up. He saw her, and for a moment a look of relief washed over his face. He stumbled toward her, reaching out with trembling hands. "Haley," he choked out. "They took it. They took everything." "What do you mean they took it?" Haley snapped, stepping back to avoid his touch. "You said you had a safe. You said you had cash. Vanessa was there," Patrick sobbed. "She was in the boardroom. She is the chairman." "I didn't know, Haley. I swear I didn't know. She owns the company. She fired me." Haley stared at him. Her mouth fell open, not in sympathy, but in horror. "She fired you," she repeated. "You are fired." "Yes," Patrick cried. "They took my phone. They took my car keys. They even took my watch. Look." He held up his bare wrist, shaking it at her, as if the absence of the Rolex would garner her pity. Haley looked at the bare wrist. Then she looked at the dirty robe. Then she looked at the security guard standing by the door, arms crossed, making sure Patrick didn't try to get back in. "So you have nothing," she said. Her voice was devoid of emotion now. It was a flat calculation. "I have my mind," Patrick pleaded. "I have my talent. I can start over, Haley. We can build a new company. We can—" With what? Haley cut him off. "With what money, Patrick? You can't even buy a subway ticket. You are 40 years old, and you are standing on a sidewalk in a bathrobe. You are not a genius. You are a liability." "Don't say that," Patrick begged, trying to grab her hand. "We love each other. You said you loved my soul." Haley laughed. It was a cruel, jagged sound that made the pedestrians stop and stare. "Your soul," she mocked. "Patrick, I loved the lifestyle you promised me. I loved the penthouses and the private jets and the parties. I didn't sign up to be the nursemaid for a broke middle-aged man with a god complex." She looked down at her hand, at the ring finger. "At least I have this," she muttered. She held up her hand, admiring the massive diamond solitaire Patrick had given her 2 weeks ago, the ring that had cost him $50,000, the ring that was the reason he couldn't pay the hotel bill today. Patrick went pale. "Actually, Haley," he whispered. "What?" Haley asked, eyes narrowing. "That ring," Patrick stammered, looking at his feet. It is not exactly what," Haley hissed. "I needed to save cash for the IPO launch party," Patrick confessed. "I bought a replica. It is moissanite, high-grade moissanite. It looks just like a diamond, but—" Haley froze. She looked at the ring, then she looked at Patrick. "It is fake," she whispered. "It is synthetic," Patrick corrected weakly. "It is practically the same thing. You gave me a fake ring," Haley screamed. Her voice cracked with pure, unadulterated fury. "You cheap, lying loser!" She yanked the ring off her finger. She didn't just take it off. She clawed it off, scratching her skin in the process. "I wasted 6 months of my life on you," she yelled. "I left a Pilates instructor for you. I thought you were a whale, Patrick. But you are just a minnow, a bottom feeder." She threw the ring. She threw it hard. It hit Patrick squarely in the forehead, bouncing off with a dull ping before clattering into the gutter among the cigarette butts and trash. Haley, Patrick cried, rubbing his head. "Please don't go. I have nobody else." "Good luck with that," Haley spat. She turned and marched toward a yellow taxi that was stopped at the light. She ripped open the back door. "Wait!" Patrick screamed, stumbling after her. "How are you going to pay for the cab? You have no money. I have the emergency cash I stole from your wallet while you were sleeping this morning," Haley yelled back. $50, enough to get me away from you." She slammed the door. The taxi peeled away, merging into the chaotic flow of traffic. Patrick stood there alone. The wind whipped his robe around his legs. People were filming him now. I could see the cell phones held up, capturing the fall of the great Patrick King. He looked around wildly. He looked at the closed doors of the company he founded. He looked at the spot where his mistress had abandoned him. Then his legs gave out. He didn't sit. He collapsed. He slid down the brick wall until he was sitting on the dirty concrete, his head in his hands. "Vanessa," he wailed. It was a sound of pure regret. He wasn't calling me because he loved me. He was calling me because I was the safety net he had slashed with his own knife. Vanessa. I am sorry. I tapped the partition. Drive, I said to the driver. Slowly. The massive Rolls-Royce glided forward. The engine purred a sound of refined power. As we passed the spot where he sat, I pressed the button to lower the rear window fully. Patrick heard the car. He knew the engine sound. He had begged me to buy this car for years, but I had always refused, saying it was too ostentatious. Now, here it was. He looked up. His face was streaked with tears and grime. His eyes met mine. For a second, time seemed to stop. He saw me sitting in the plush leather interior, surrounded by the security and wealth he had thrown away. He saw the cold indifference in my eyes. He saw a woman who was no longer his wife, no longer his savior, and no longer his victim. Vanessa, he whispered, reaching a hand out toward the car. Help me, please. I didn't blink. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I simply looked at him as one would look at a stranger on the street. I pressed the button on the armrest. The glass window began to rise. It moved smoothly, silently, erasing him from my view. Vanessa, he screamed as the glass sealed shut. I turned my head away, facing the front. Don't stop, I told the driver. The car accelerated, merging into the traffic, leaving the man who wanted nothing sitting on the sidewalk with exactly what he had asked for. I opened my laptop. I had a company to rebrand, and I had a life to live. The rearview mirror showed a shrinking figure in a dirty robe, but I didn't look. I was already looking forward. The skyline of Manhattan looked different from the 45th floor of Aurora Tower. It looked clearer, sharper. Maybe it was just the new glass windows I had installed during the renovation, or maybe it was simply the clarity that comes when you finally cut the dead weight from your life. It had been exactly 1 year since the day I stood in the lobby and watched my husband dragged out like a common criminal. 1 year since the name Kingstream was scrubbed from the building and replaced with Aurora. I sat in my corner office, the one that used to be his. The black marble table was gone, replaced by warm oak and soft cream leather. The aggressively masculine art was gone, replaced by abstract pieces that inspired creativity rather than intimidation. On my desk sat a copy of Fortune magazine. It had arrived this morning fresh off the press. I picked it up, feeling the glossy weight of it in my hands. The cover image was striking. It was me standing on the balcony of this very building wearing the white suit I had worn on the day of the execution. I looked strong. I looked unbothered. And the headline in bold gold letters read, "The Real Power Behind the Throne, How Vanessa King Reclaimed Her Empire and Doubled Its Value in 12 Months. I traced the letters with my finger. For 10 years, I had been the silent partner, the invisible wallet, the woman behind the man. Now I was just the woman, and that was more than enough. A knock on the doorframe interrupted my thoughts. I looked up. Standing there was David. He was 42 years old, a celebrated architect who designed sustainable housing for low-income communities. He was wearing a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and his hands were covered in graphite dust from his drafting table. He didn't look like a CEO. He didn't care about stock prices. He cared about foundations. "Knock, knock," David said, smiling. His eyes crinkled at the corners, a genuine expression that never failed to make my chest feel light. "I brought you a matcha latte, oat milk, no sugar." He walked in and placed the cup on my desk right next to the magazine. He looked down at the cover. "Wow," he said. "You look dangerous." I laughed. "I hope not. I look competent." "You look like a queen," David corrected. He leaned down and kissed my forehead, a gentle, lingering kiss that asked for nothing. Patrick used to kiss me like he was marking territory. David kissed me like he was greeting a partner. "Are we still on for dinner tonight?" he asked. "My firm just finished the blueprints for the Bronx project. I want to celebrate." I smiled. "Italian?" I asked. "Actually, I was thinking tacos," David said. "There is a great truck in Brooklyn, best salsa in the city, and I promise I will pay." I laughed again. With Patrick, it was always about the most expensive table at the most exclusive restaurant where he could be seen. With David, it was about the food and the company. He knew I was a billionaire, and he insisted on buying me $3 tacos because that was what a partner did. I would love tacos, I said. Great, David said. I will pick you up at 7. Don't work too hard, boss lady. He walked out, whistling a tune. I spun my chair around to look out the window again. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the city. I took a sip of the latte. It was perfect. I had everything. I had my name back. I had my company back. And for the first time in my life, I had a man who loved me for the woman I was, not the ladder I could help him climb. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Jordan, who was now my COO. Stock is up another 4 points. The market loves the new direction. You were right about pivoting to green energy. I smiled. I was right. I had always been right. Patrick just never listened. I put the phone down and looked at the city one last time before getting back to work. Somewhere down there in the maze of concrete and steel life was moving on. 5 miles away, in a part of Queens where the tourists never went, the sun did not cast a golden glow. It just highlighted the grime on the windows of Joe's all-day diner. The air inside was thick with the smell of old fryer grease and burnt coffee. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed with an annoying flicker that induced headaches within minutes. In the back near the kitchen doors, a man was hunched over a plastic tub of dirty dishes. He was wearing a stained white apron over a tattered gray t-shirt. His hands, once manicured and soft, were red and chapped from the harsh industrial soap. His fingernails were broken. Patrick King scrubbed a plate with a piece of steel wool. He scrubbed it hard, trying to remove the dried egg yolk that refused to budge. Faster, Patrick the line cook shouted, slamming another tray of dirty dishes onto the counter. We are running out of forks. I'm going as fast as I can, Patrick muttered. His voice was raspy. He hadn't spoken much in the last year. There was nobody to listen. He picked up a fork. He looked at it. It was cheap metal stamped with the words, China. He remembered the weight of the silver forks at the Plaza Hotel. He remembered the feel of the crystal glass in his hand the night of the IPO. That night felt like a dream now. A hallucination. He finished the tray and wiped his hands on his apron. His back ached. He slept on a futon in a basement apartment he shared with 2 college students who didn't know his name and didn't care. They just knew him as the old guy who paid his share of the rent in cash every Friday. Hey, Pat, table 4 needs bussing, the waitress yelled. She was a woman in her 50s who had zero patience for his slowness. Patrick walked out into the dining area. He kept his head down. He always kept his head down. He was terrified that someone might recognize him, but nobody ever did. Without the Armani suits, without the Rolex, without the arrogance, he was invisible. He was just another broken man in a city full of them. He reached table 4. The customers had just left, leaving a mess of napkins and half-eaten burgers. Patrick started stacking the plates. Then he saw it. One of the customers had left a magazine on the booth seat. It was Fortune. Patrick froze. His hand hovered over a ketchup-stained plate. He saw the white suit first. He knew that suit. He had told her it was too severe. He had told her she should wear something softer, something that made her look more like a wife. Then he saw the face. Vanessa. She looked radiant. She looked younger than she had when they were married. Her eyes were sharp, confident, and full of life. And the headline, the real power behind the Kingstream empire. Patrick felt his knees go weak. He reached out with a trembling hand and picked up the magazine. He opened it to the feature article. There were photos of the new office, photos of the new logo. Aurora. He read the first paragraph. For a decade, Vanessa King was the silent genius funding the tech giant formerly known as Kingstream. While her ex-husband played the role of the charismatic leader, it was Vanessa's capital and strategic vision that kept the company afloat. Now free from the dead weight of the past, she has taken the helm, and the results are undeniable. Dead weight. The words echoed in his mind. That was what he had called her. That was what he had said on stage. I need to shed the dead weight. He realized now with a crushing clarity that he was the weight. He was the anchor dragging them down, and now that she had cut the rope, she was soaring. He looked at the photo of Vanessa again. She was smiling, not the fake smile she used to give him at parties, but a real smile. And next to her, in a smaller photo, was a man, a guy in a flannel shirt. The caption read, "Vanessa King, with her partner architect David Miller." She had replaced him, not with another billionaire, not with a celebrity, but with a builder, a man who created things instead of just talking about them. Patrick felt a tear slide down his cheek. It mixed with the sweat and grease on his face. He had promised to leave with nothing. He looked around the diner, the peeling vinyl seats, the sticky floor, the fly buzzing against the window. He had nothing. "Hey!" The shout made him jump. He turned around. The owner of the diner, a large man named Tony, was standing behind the counter glaring at him. "What do you think you're doing?" Patrick Tony yelled. "This isn't a library. Stop reading the trash and clean the table. I have customers waiting." Patrick looked at the magazine one last time. He looked at the life he had thrown away because he thought he deserved better. "I am sorry," Tony Patrick whispered. He dropped the magazine into the trash bin on his cart. He watched Vanessa's face disappear under a pile of used napkins and coffee grounds. He picked up the spray bottle and the rag. He sprayed the table. Wipe, spray, wipe. The motion was repetitive, endless. This was his life now. Patrick Tony yelled again, "Move it." "Yes, boss," Patrick said. He kept wiping, erasing the crumbs just like Vanessa had erased him. And as he worked, the steam from the kitchen rose up around him, swallowing him whole, leaving the world outside, bright and golden and completely out of reach. Thank you for listening to this story of ultimate karma. If you enjoyed watching Vanessa take back her power and leave Patrick exactly where he belonged, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice served cold. What was your favorite part? Let me know in the comments below.